Anyone that says, oh, we've got all our maintenance positions filled at the company is lying to you. It's the hardest thing to fill today. People are not excited about working with their hands in the way that they were 20, 30 years ago. And those techs are retiring. In the foreseeable future, we're still going to need a maintenance person to go out for an on-call work order, to crawl in under the sink and fix the garbage disposal, etc. But not forever. You go here in Chicago, I travel a ton, specifically targeted at fast food workers. And I can tell you a lot of them have gone to a kiosk system, or they incentivize you to do it on your app, do the mobile order. Let's not kid ourselves. What is that doing? That's reducing headcount. If you've been to Las Vegas, you've seen like the robot at the Sphere. That thing freaks me out. It's like the iRobot from the Will Smith movie. That thing starts talking to me and I'm like, nope, I'm out.
One of the key things we're talking about is, the growth of the business, right? So how, I'd love to hear kind of your story of getting into multifamily and the growth personally for you, but also like the growth you've seen in the industry. So maybe you can share a little bit about how you got into multifamily and maybe a little bit about your focus.
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of people that you talk to by mistake, right? I had no intention of being in multifamily, and this is the late 90s. And I found myself looking for a job at the time, kind of in sales management. And so I started on site, actually with what is now, it's inland in Oak Brook, Illinois. And they had a management arm of what we would call today as kind of attainable value add property. And I spent a year with them, and then I ended up with Village Green out of Michigan for 17 years.
Wow.
And with them, I progressed, was able to move my career forward through just a myriad of different experience. And as the GFC had kind of positioned myself knowledge-wise, was certainly well-versed in lease-up and value-add. Moved into a vice president operational role in kind of 08, 09, which candidly was pretty young for me at the time. Was definitely still learning and cutting my teeth. But what I was able to do, and if we look back to kind of 08 and 09 and the stress that was on the industry then, you learn a lot through the pressure cooker days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of those lessons, even though I do a bit more business development, I definitely still have a lot of footing in operations. Those have proven to be very helpful. And you could tell the people today that are going through a bit of a downturn that were around in 08, right? Because the same mistakes aren't necessarily being made. I think, we talked about, or we've all heard about, oh, the wall of debt is coming. The wall of debt is coming. I don't think anyone's really seen that. We've seen some one-offs or some portfolios that get out there, and you look at it and you go, okay, was that a sign of the times, or was that a sign of someone getting far too aggressive? And I will say more often than not, the stuff that I have seen that has actually become economically distressed property, it was people buying 1980s vintage deals for 3 caps. And you go, yeah, of course that's distressed, because it was, you paid too much, you put floating rate debt on it, you probably had mezzanine debt on top of that. And yeah, when we're raising rents 5, 7, 10% a year without spending any capital, those deals will work. But those days can't last forever. And so, the true distressed wall, I don't think has hit. I think a lot of people from the investment side were able to work those deals out, talking to their lenders, talking with their partners and saying, we're going to hold this longer than we thought, or, we're going to restructure and put some money in, but the property itself isn't necessarily bad property. And so, worth holding on to and figuring out. My journey, I've been in the industry, this is my 26th year. Still loving it, man. Still passionate about it. I look back to what it was back then to what it is today, and it's a different industry.
You spend a lot of time too mentoring others, spending time with others,
Sure.
Connecting the dots of others. And I'm curious to know, because you give out a lot of advice, you've been through a lot of cycles, you've seen a lot of things, and a lot of people come and go. What's one thing you know now that you wish you could have told yourself flying back 20 years, like Marty McFly?
It's a very great question. I would say be more measured. I think, you talk about maybe the intemperance of youth. So, early in your career, there's a lot of energy and a lot of excitement behind getting the deal done and, closing on a multifamily asset or getting that third party management contract. And as you fast forward, the adrenaline of getting it done begins to be outweighed by the remorse of doing the wrong deals. And so I don't know if that's a DeLorean moment or not, but certainly, a few cycles and a few bruises and definitely have become more measured in the approach.
Yeah, and something that we were talking about before we start rolling on camera, the situation that currently happens. We don't see a lot of deals happening, a lot of transactions.
Yeah.
Most companies that are in the business of buying and selling real estate are basing their business models on those transactions. So when there's no transactions, there's no fees for them to charge. Therefore, it makes it very, very difficult for them to stay at the size that they currently are. Therefore, the next thing that's happening is layoffs. I think we're seeing, I'm sure that you're aware of a lot of people being laid off. There's probably another wave coming out there. How do you think this is going to play out in a immediate future, like 6 months, a year, 3 years? Do you have any thoughts on how this is going to play out with transactions? And then there's so much involved here. Are we going to see more transactions and these people are going to be hired back at some capacity?
Yeah.
Or is this going to, go on for a number of years? So what are some thoughts there?
So, yeah, I would say in the 6 month window, I don't want to sound doom and gloom because I've already seen some things starting to shake loose in terms of acquisitions. I think there will still be some layoffs here in 25. If we go back to the NMHC annual 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago is survive until 25, right? And here we sit and I think, it's probably 26 or maybe 27 before we're back in a robust period. And there's just so much uncertainty. And so if we take the two different buckets and we look at acquisitions first, I think that will have a propensity to rebound a bit faster for a number of reasons. We were buying multifamily deals and managing those deals in a 7% interest rate environment, as recently as 10 years ago, right? So that is not an insurmountable hurdle, right? We can get past that. We can figure out how to buy those deals at 6 or 7% interest because 2.5 to 3 wasn't sustainable. I don't think we'll ever see that in our lifetime. And again, it created, call it false ceilings and false bottoms, right? So getting a stable interest rate environment, people will be able to buy again. And I actually think that will be pretty robust because of the uncertainty in development. If you look at a construction loan today, and certainly, people can poke holes in the statement, but you look at the going in rate plus 2 to 3% to get a construction loan done. That's a major hurdle, right? Because now you're talking 9 or 10%. Can you make those deals work? Probably in coastal and tier 1 markets, you can. You're going to have to get real creative with financing to do your smaller market deals, your smaller unit count deals. That's where I think the in-place inventory will actually be propped up a little bit. Because when we talk about cost replacement, you have the debt scenario, you have the unknown, and we're now calling it T word, right? Tariffs. What's interesting about that is there's a lot of noise there, right? Oh my goodness, for this, it's our lumber, our appliances, our lumber is actually cheaper today than it was 12 months ago. Okay, so we can put that one to rest for now, right? Because the vast majority of lumber that is used in development in the United States comes from our neighbor to the north. So if that heats back up, that could be problematic. Similarly, if you ever look at your refrigerator, your stove at home, and you actually pull it and you look on the inside of it, most of them say assembled in Mexico. Now, the parts can be sourced from all different places, but the assembly is coming from the south. That could be problematic. It's on hold for now. So I think that uncertainty coupled with interest rates, we talk about those layoffs. I think the development folks might have a longer runway to return. When do I think that is? I am not an economist and the total crystal ball. I think we're probably 12 to 18 months before development ramps back up, and a lot of that will be supply or demand driven. We all know the oversupplied markets. I don't need to rattle those off, but I look at some of the markets that aren't oversupplied. There's several that are, I would say, at 95% occupancy for a reason, and the rents are trending back up. We're all sitting in Chicago today. The rents here are stable. They're moving forward, and that's because everyone 5 years ago said we have to build south of the Mason-Dixon line, and Austin and Orlando and Tampa and Atlanta saw 10, 20, 40,000 units of new delivery. Chicago saw 5. Chicago is still one of the top 3 MSAs in the country, regardless of what population growth has done here or I should say population stagnation or decline. It's still, an MSA that if you include the suburbs is probably north of 6 or 7 million people. And it hasn't had the unit delivery. And so, I think those markets, just out of necessity, people will find a way. Now, what will pricing look like on those units? We won't get into necessarily the nuance of that, but to build them, they're going to cater to the top of the economic triangle, right? And so that still leaves kind of that unsolved and undetermined for the other 80% of renters who aren't going to be able to get into those brand new deals.
Going a little further, and I want to touch on a different aspect. Management companies, and let's just say probably specific to third-party management companies. Yeah. In order to run a efficient, profitable third-party management business, you got to increase volume. Like, you just got to increase volume. Do you see any type of movements in the market currently of companies making bold moves to improve their bottom line? Like maybe some acquisitions, maybe mergers, maybe consolidation. Any of that, do you think?
More now than I've heard in the last few decades, right? I'm hearing from broker friends. I'm hearing from individuals that maybe have been laid off recently. The way I see kind of, or at least the rumor mill playing out over the next few years is I definitely think you're going to see more consolidation for a myriad of reasons. But to the point of, the development fees and the acquisition fees not being realized, those are paying payroll. Those are keeping kind of the train moving. And when they don't, there's only so much laying off or restructuring that you can do before, the dollars just don't make sense. And I've always kind of been the mental advocate of, you need to be north of 10,000 units to even consider being your own management company. Anything smaller than that, you can do it, but you're probably going to do it at a loss because, like many things, volume, is going to kind of fuel the ship as it relates to property management. Because property management is not a high margin business, certainly not comparative to development and property ownership. And so, yeah, I've heard from brokers and friends in the industry, about several companies that either are having active conversations or certainly are having passive conversations to say, hey, we've both been around for a long time. Do we do some kind of strategic joint venture, or do we just truly merge, or can you buy us? Companies have certainly reached out to me, and we're a 40-plus-year-old company that has no interest in being acquired. But, I would say on a cold call basis, there's definitely those calls being made. So there's an appetite for it. And part of that comes from that dry powder that we talk about. Well, we've got all this money and we can't build because that doesn't make sense. And we can't buy because maybe that doesn't make sense in the target markets that we want to be in, et cetera. Maybe we grow volume a different way, and that's acquiring a company. And so I think you'll see a lot of that, certainly until water kind of reaches its new level on acquisitions and development.
That's an extremely interesting observation. Do you think that top 50 management companies will keep consolidate, like will keep gaining market share, not just in a short and mid-term, but long-term as well? Do you see that as staying as a trend?
Yeah, so the top 50 is very interesting to me because there's really kind of that top 5 or 10 who Sometimes they change positions, but they're usually in the same unless there's some prolific acquisition of two large companies joining up, et cetera. But, once you get past that top 10, there's a lot of jockeying. There's usually kind of 20% that falls off and a new 20% that rises up. And so I think that movement will continue. I think if you want to stay in that top 5, your number will have to grow probably 15 to 20% a year to stay in that. I mean, I've heard from several people that, Greystar is going to go past 1 million. That makes sense to me. We talk about those joint ventures. I mean, they went out and they joined forces with yet another development company. They just had a strategic, I'm not sure if it was a merger or a joint venture with Trilogy here in Chicago. The principals had their roots growing up at Greystar, so kind of a bit of a return to home in a different position for them. But I think you'll see more of that, and those large companies, if they don't do the layoffs and they do have the overhead capacity, picking up 15, 20,000 units is very doable for an 800,000 or 900,000 unit company, right? Whereas, I look at, 20,000 units and adding that to my portfolio today, I would go, we would need to, bite that elephant one bite at a time. So those big companies have the bandwidth to absorb, and I think you'll see a lot of that in the near future.
Is there any appetite to sell on the companies that are targeted to be acquired? How much of an appetite do you see?
What's the number, right? When you
For the right number.
That's right. Price, yeah. When you talked about merger and acquisition 5 to 7 years ago, the multiple on in-place revenue was probably half of what things are trading for today, right? Because property management, in essence, a 30-day terminable contract, right? And so it's very hard to underwrite that business because it's not as sticky. It's not like retail or office where you have these long-term, long tenant leases. Our residents can move out even if they're on a year lease. They can give us 30 days and pay their penalties and they can go. Property management agreements for the most part are structured in a very similar facet. And so it's hard to underwrite deals to buy management companies. But, I think back to a tech-based company bought a property management company in the Southeast. And I don't remember what the multiple on that was, but I remember it left us all scratching our heads because it was kind of 4 or 5x what anyone had ever paid for a management company. And now that's becoming the new norm, right? So the value on those has gone up so exponentially that I think you'll find kind of those mid-level players in the property management space going, I'm not a seller. And then they go, well, what's the number?
Could it have been like the particular situation you're referring to? And I believe I know exactly which company that is. Do you believe that was made possible at the time because tech companies, their valuation tends to blow way faster,
yes,
way bigger than real estate companies, and then they were in a position to look at their valuation and say, we just grew 10 times, we could actually our company value allows us to maybe refi and cash out or bring investors that will actually help us buy this management company.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think you're looking at it with the perfect lens. I think when tech companies get involved in property management in that facet, the intent is to take that tech and move it onto the properties, right? And so you get to, I don't want to say double dip the revenue, but you're pulling from different streams. It's not just your standard percentage fee and in-place revenue to create the management opportunity. It's also this tech that you're going to push out to the residents. So you're not just buying a company that manages 60 or 80 or 100 properties. You're buying access to, what would that be? 20, 30,000 residents, right? And now, the revenue stream is flowing from two different places, which allows you to underwrite a much higher valuation. And so, people are getting creative to make these deals work. And I don't think that will be the last that we see of that. I mean, I went to RetCon, there's Blueprint, there's OpTech, there's so many tech conferences. And by the way, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you went to Apartmentalize and you went to OpTech, and that was kind of it, right? And there's so many tech startups and there's so much tech that's just flooded into our space that, yeah, I absolutely see more of those deals taking place where you'll have a very strong platform, whatever that might be, right? And I can't tell you if that is a property management solution, if that's a self-guided touring solution, who knows? But there's smart people out there that are trying to figure out how to make money, and if they can look at that as a way to get access to grow those multiple revenue streams, it'll happen.
It's time gate entry systems were reimagined. Tired of dealing with clickers, key fobs, broken call boxes, and keypads everyone has the code to? Imagine managing multiple properties and realizing your keys are miles away. With Gatewise, access is in your pocket. No codes, no hassle. Residents can let in guests or deliveries from anywhere with a single tap. Gatewise integrates with your property management system, automatically revoking access when residents move out. The Gatewise management portal makes it easy to control every access point remotely from any device. No dedicated computer required, just smart, flexible control at your fingertips. Gatewise also supports self-storage, giving your team cloud-based control over tenant access. Fast, secure, and fully remote. More convenience for your residents, more time and cost savings for your team.
What has changed from 10 years ago when you said that we only had like 2 conferences and now there's like, I don't know, like 50 or 20? I'm not even counting here those that are basically on the backs of like the National Apartment Association and
Yep.
NMHC. There's other like smaller conferences that tend to middle market.
Yeah.
And they have IMN, for example, which is not like a very well known.
No, IMED, Interface, BizNow. There's so many of those.
IMN has an incredible lineup of conferences. I just know specifically because I partner with them as a media partner, but they have like 40, 50 events a year in real estate, and in multifamily specifically, probably like 8 to 10. And they're geographically, our position. So what has changed for the past 10 years that we have like so much more tech and so many other conferences that just grew overnight?
Well, I think, when you look at the conference business, which I don't pretend to be an expert in that space, but I think I get the model. And a lot of it's buying access, right? So if you can get the right folks in the room, the right attendees to show up, so that is creating a powerful agenda, getting speakers that people want to hear from, talking about topics people want to hear about. And right now, there's a lot of topics that people want to discuss. They want to talk about attainable housing, and I make the differentiation. Affordable housing, for me, that's going to be LIHTC, that's going to be subsidized, that's going to be programmatic affordable. But attainable, I would argue, probably one of the largest cohorts of renters in the space that can't move into that, class AA plus high rise, but they're a renter. I mean, we look at the difference between what it costs to own and what it costs to rent in the same market, and that delta has become larger than it has in the last 30 or 40 years. There's a lot of renters by necessity, right? And so people want to hear about that, and how are we solving for that? People want to learn about how AI is going to influence the renter experience, how it's going to make things faster, more efficient, all those things. And so, when you put kind of those buzzword topics out there and you get speakers that people want to hear from, they're going to show up. And if they're going to show up, I'm sure the conference and event planners have no problem selling to the suppliers in the space that want that networking access to those people.
Exciting times?
I think so, yeah. I mean, look, we're in a downturn. That's not exciting. Notice I didn't use the word recession. And I didn't, and not say that will or won't come. But if you look at, key indicators of what creates a recession, there is still moderate job growth. Yes, the market has been an absolute roller coaster, but it'll go down 1,000 points and up 1,000 points the next day, right? You look at some of the more static things like the 10-year treasury, which is what a lot of us look at as we look at, multifamily finance. It's been pretty stable. It's fluctuated with the markets, but we haven't seen it roller coaster the way that you think it would with the other instabilities. As a result, I think we concentrate on the good stuff, and there's a lot of exciting good stuff.
When we're thinking about disruption, companies that have incredible level of funding, they've been incredibly successful, and then they might want to consider one day making a play in multifamily. And I want to start with the first example. The first that comes to mind to me, it's McDonald's.
Yeah.
Right? They've been incredibly successful. They're one of the largest, if not the largest, owner of real estate in the world. Probably not so many people know that. They came up with a solution, with a formula to run an incredible business with low-pay employees. And this is one of the things that we are basically doing too, compared with other sister industries. Ours are towards the lower end of the scale, I'll say, especially site level, which could make it difficult at the level to operate. But that's besides the point. What I'm just thinking about, McDonald's, great profits. They have probably an excess of money, so they can really build another McDonald's at every street corner just because they have the funds. Typically, companies like this, look for ways to reinvest their money. And the first that comes to mind is real estate. All money has been made that way. Is still made. There's still a good, business if it's done right. So what if McDonald's says, they go to Greystar and say, Greystar, we give you $5 million tomorrow, want to invest in multifamily, and you will help us. We will, we'll do a joint venture, and then we will run property management like we run the McDonald's. Like we'll take that efficiency model. What do you think about that scenario?
I mean, look, that would epitomize disruption, not their $5 billion. We see foreign capital investments. I see term sheets from, so you said McDonald's being one of the largest real estate owners. The largest real estate owner in the world is the Catholic Church. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And some people don't realize that.
Yeah.
But, you have pension funds, you have religious organizations, you have life cos. They can all come in with meaningful dollars of that scale. And that can create some pricing instability market by market based on where their focus is. I think the bigger thing that you touched on, though, is their operational model. We've all talked about, how do we get more efficient? I think 3 to 5 years ago, is that through reducing headcount and increasing technology? I think some of that's happened, but I think there's been some lessons along the way that maybe it's not about headcount, it's about efficiency and service offered, as opposed to necessarily reducing headcount. I can tell you at Buckingham, one of the things that we did was on the maintenance side, and we started doing more of a potting system with our service and our technicians. They're getting auto-directed work orders out of the property management system based on what they're good at, based on their discipline, right? If you're a great carpenter, you're going to get those carpentry tickets. If you're the plumbing guy, you're going to get the plumbing tickets. If you're, the woman that's fantastic with taping and framing, you're going to get that. With the auto direction of tickets and utilizing technology to make sure the right people are doing the right jobs, the callbacks are less, the response time is better. And by taking those and maybe taking, instead of a 250 unit deal, having 4 properties and making it a 1,000 unit hub that geographically works, you can redistribute that payroll in a more meaningful way. So maybe the headcount did reduce. And I will say through attrition, anyone that says, oh, we've got all our maintenance positions filled at the company is lying to you. It's the hardest thing to fill today. But by doing that potting, you have more money. You can pay people more meaningful dollars for those specialties that they're good at. And I think that is a shift that the industry will have to start making, because the trade schools are at a low in terms of people and enrollment. People are not excited about working with their hands in the way that they were 20, 30 years ago. And those techs are retiring. And so how do we backfill that? And I think utilization of efficiency will help solve some of that puzzle.
There's another piece here too, and I'm going to go back to disruption after that. But this piece is, I read an article like 2 or 3 weeks ago about a company from New York that bought a robot that's being made in Israel that installs drywall, and it does it at a rate of 1,500 square feet per hour, with less dust. It doesn't call in sick.
Yeah.
doesn't ask for benefits,
Doesn't need a lunch break.
nothing. And that's that's today. Imagine that machine 5 or 10 years from now. Not even that, like 2 3 years from now, learning from its mistakes and improving its efficiency. How many jobs will literally eliminate? Like we're not talking about making jobs better. It literally eliminates jobs.
Yeah.
And how do you see, this trending? Since we both know the labor line item in a budget is one of the heaviest,
Yep.
and one that's like the most targeted to be trimmed or eliminated as much as possible. So, in light of that, where do you think that innovation is going to go with innovations like this to change, to disrupt the human business that we all talk about?
Well, I definitely want to research this robot more because that sounds prolific. It's happening. It's already happening, and maybe not in our industry yet, but you brought up McDonald's, so we're going to circle back to that.
Yep.
5-7 years ago, whenever that push was to increase minimum wage, specifically targeted at fast food workers, right? And it was a $15 an hour movement. And then we look at the West Coast and it was a $25 an hour movement. The folks that run these franchises are very savvy business folks. They've been doing it a long time. You go here in Chicago, I travel a ton. I eat more fast food than I should. And I can tell you a lot of them have gone to a kiosk system, or they incentivize you to do it on your app, do the mobile order. Let's not kid ourselves. What is that doing? That's reducing headcount.
Absolutely.
Kind of indicative based on that unskilled payroll level. That's already starting to happen. So can I see that continue to happen? Absolutely. Now, what are going to be some of the intangibles that can't be replaced, at least in the near term? If you've been to Las Vegas, you've seen like the robot at the Sphere. That thing freaks me out. It's like the iRobot from the Will Smith movie. That thing starts talking to me and I'm like, nope, I'm out. Not yet. There is a reality that in the foreseeable future, we're still going to need a maintenance person to go out for an on-call work order, to crawl in under the sink and, fix the garbage disposal, etc. But not forever. Technology will get us to a point where a lot of that will be remote service, self-service. Do you know Guillermo? Yeah.
Iris.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Iris. Of course.
And so he's working on something there at Iris that I think solves for some of this. And it doesn't eliminate the person, but eliminates sometimes the travel. It reduces the back and forth trips. And if you're not familiar, I'd certainly invite you to check out Iris. But they're basically using a proprietary FaceTime-like technology to where the technician can speak with you if you opt in for that. And oh my goodness, you have a flood. Can you turn your camera around and show me where it's flooding and what's going on? Well, now they don't have to go there, diagnose the issue, go back to the shop, get the right parts, go back to the apartment. They could say, can you turn that little knob right there and shut off the water so we don't damage any more of your stuff? Great. Now we've stopped the primary emergency. And he already looked, or she already looked. They saw what the problem is, so at least they have a good indicator of what to grab before they even get there. Well, now you've created less back and forth trip. You've got a happier resident because you fixed it right the first time. And if it's happening at 10 at night, they don't want you there till 2 in the morning. They want you in and out and they want it fixed, right? And so technologies like that, I think, are the first step to the next generation.
Disruption, second part. Procurement. We've been talking about companies trying to run things more efficient, not a high margin business.
Yep.
And one of the areas that I've seen us like having a huge, incredible opportunity, we're leaving millions and millions of dollars on the table, is procurement. It's still done like very archaic way, like in the 1990s or early 2000s.
Yep.
And now I'm thinking another company disrupting Amazon. Like Amazon has this down to an art. My front door is being flooded with boxes every single day.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I think about when I need to get me something, the first step for me is like automatically Amazon, like absolutely Amazon. I do some price comparison and I look somewhere else occasionally, not all the time, but for the most part,
You can't beat the
Amazon.
convenience, yeah.
It's extremely effective too. Like if you have an issue with them, that just like if you're like a Prime account member, you just do a complaint and they'll just take care of it, no questions asked. It's incredible. If we compare that with a system that we use in multifamily currently, I'm just saying if Amazon makes a real play of getting into procurement seriously in multifamily, in no time at all, you will see the current MRO vendors becoming sellers on Amazon.
Oh, 100%.
Because they're not built to compete with anywhere near.
No.
This is decades of expertise at the highest level. And they just don't have, like, they don't, even if they throw money at the problem, they can't build that overnight. It's kind of like an unbeatable machine. Amazon is. Would you see that happening, actually, like being a real thing that happens within the next 2 to 5 years, maybe?
Yeah, no, I could absolutely see that. And I think procurement doesn't go away, but it shifts to contract services, right? So it shifts to the tangible labor being provided at your property, roofs, roads, whatever those things look like. But the actual source materials, why wouldn't an Amazon get involved in that, right? It's just another silo for them to attack. And to that point, if you do your homework, you understand the Amazon model, the retailers are all just playing the game, so to speak. But the difference is playing by the Amazon rules. And you talk about the boxes at the door, this thing to hold some of our like pool noodles and stuff out on the patio. And it came with this stupid Allen key, and my wife and I, that's going to cause a divorce someday, trying to build these stupid things with the, but...
that one in IKEA. Put it together in IKEA.
Yeah, no,
furniture.
Same stuff. But it came, and I'm opening it, and there was a big crack in it. And I went, come on. So I go on there and take a picture. Within 6 hours, we're sending you a new one. It'll be there tomorrow. And keep in mind, it's not like Amazon's providing that product. It was a retailer who's on Amazon.
The seller, yeah.
Yeah, but the seller, based on Amazon rules, has to stand behind it. And you just go. And then, unless they find abuse from your account, if you're doing that habitually, it works. And so I think, that streamlining combined with price and deliverable efficiency, then you talk about downsizing your shops, because the parts can go right to the unit, right? Then you have even more efficiencies gained. So, I think that day is coming, and I think, you said 2 to 5 years, and I think you're probably right in line with where it will be.
Also, the inventory model that Amazon has, they do their inventory based on the weight of the parts that are in a bin. So if you pull a part out of the bin, automatically the inventory gets adjusted. We could use the same thing at a shop. We're still counting, digging through the boxes and writing stuff down. If we have that type of inventory present, and also with some AI cameras, when you put something in your pocket, the camera actually knows that it's in your pocket, and it removes it from the inventory and assigns it to you for a work order. It's also preventing, theft.
Yeah.
Too. If you can't link it to a work order that you have done it, you have to return it back to the main shop. So I think there's just so much that technology. Yeah,
it goes back to that potting too, right? If you have kind of the man in the van maintenance setup, then it's just a human resources at time a hire condition of having those supplies sent to the technician's home, so that come the next morning, based on the needs of the work orders, they have what they need. And by the way, we didn't end up using that 3-inch flex pipe. Okay, put that back in the shop. It gets re-inventoried in. Yeah, I think you can then create that additional efficiency to where you don't have to have the technician go to a centralized shop to even get supplies. They come to them, and they go straight to the project site or the work site, as opposed to any travel time back and forth.
Training and having an AI-driven training body for each employee. This is another thing that I'm envisioning, and it's probably happening as we speak, maybe not at your company's leasing office or most companies' leasing offices, but I'm seeing, I think it's being built as we speak. I have a very strong feeling about this. And let me explain. Technology and AI could actually map out your behavior, your training needs, your education needs, to know more about you, way more about you than you know about yourself. And it could actually use information, plugging into this training body, this training entity, to be right there for you whenever you need something. Basically tell you what are some things that you need to improve on, have ready answers for the things that you're not so great at. that you might be asking. How soon are we from that type of scenario?
I think we're probably 3 to 5 years out from that scenario. Now, how far are we out from that scenario being successfully implemented and accepted by the employee? That's the second part of the question that I don't know. Early in my career, when you had the learning modules that were, watch this class, take the test, watch this class, take the test. What did everyone do? They skipped through the module, they took the test. Oh, you need a 75 to pass and you got a 70. All right, I'll restart it. I'll click through it again. I know what I missed and I passed, right? And so that was an easier system to kind of game. And so you'll have that part of it to make sure that people are actually learning. But the other thing is you don't want it to seem punitive. You want them to learn and want to learn. And so how do you take that so that it's less Big Brother and more accepted? That's the question. I don't know.
You're raising a great point here. I just wanted to say that we as society, we're not even talking about the specific word of multifamily, we gave up privacy for convenience long time ago, and it's never coming back.
No.
It's never coming back. We just crossed that Rubicon a long time ago. And just something silly that comes to mind, my wife was sharing with me a coworker being excited about receiving like a $50 gift card to basically allow their insurance company to their medical records. That's just that's just one little piece out there that's probably happening a billion times.
Oh, I mean, look at social media. You and I will
Absolutely.
mention, did you see the new Ram truck? I'll send you a screenshot tonight. I bet your Ram truck will show up on my Instagram or my Facebook or something like that.
100%. It's probably on my feed right now.
Yeah.
Or within the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, we're already there to where the direct ads and the Big Brother is doing its thing. So spot on in the fact that we gave up privacy for convenience, and I think that will only get more intense.
Yeah, incredible conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Share with the audience here, what are some things that you're excited about for the near future, 2, 5, 10 years? What are some things that you're looking forward to?
Obviously some stability to return, and for us to get building again in a meaningful way. I am excited about what technology can bring to the construction process. For a decade or more, we've talked about modular, right? And that's going to be the game changer. We're finally building modular in a meaningful way. Now, the brakes have been pumped due to economics, but the construction methodology itself is actually happening. What we thought was the future is now the infancy of what can be. That really excites me, and I think we're moving towards something pretty big there. And I look at that as part of the solution for this attainability crisis that we're having in housing. Because to build brand new, you have to end up building Class A. To build Class A, you have to build to the top of the economic period. But if you can figure out how to quote unquote build a B, right? If we do something nicely appointed, nicely amenitized, but it's not, thick quartz and smart appliances. It's a great, safe,
the basic needs.
Yeah. And if we can build that and hit that middle price point, that's where the majority of our renters are, right? So if we can meet that need through construction methodology that gets more efficient, that really excites me. And I think it solves a lot of the problems that we talk about, whether you vote red or blue, everyone's talking about that. I think the solution will come from the utilization of that construction technology. So that really excites me. And I think that is going to be the trend of the future.
Yeah, let's go, brother.
Yeah, man. Good to talk to you, Adrian.
Yeah.